Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the penultimate session of Day 5 of the eFrames FICCI 2020. The session has Ms. Anuradha Sengupta, Consulting Editor, CNBC TV 18, is the moderator. The session is titled The Digital Newspaper is Here to Stay. To tell us more, I would like to invite Ms. Anuradha to introduce the panel and take it from there. Anuradha, platform is all yours.
Hi, everybody. It is really fun and sort of surreal to see that I'm sitting here getting ready to start a session at FICCI Frames, sitting cross-legged on my bed, okay? So it feels weird to do that, but because normally we would have been in a banquet hall in a big five-star hotel in Mumbai, and there would be tons of people. We could see all of you. I'm missing the ability to see all of you. I'm missing the fact that we would be networking and catching up after years. But here we are. COVID-19 has done this to us, and we are all rising to the occasion. We've got a wonderful panel of people with us. I'm sure you're familiar with most of them. If you've signed in for the session, then you know. I'm going to start with M.K. Venu. He's the co-founder of The Wire, an independent not-for-profit media venture. I have Ritu, CEO and co-founder of the Quint. I have Yasir from Euronews, Carlos from Al Jazeera, Fatima from the Atlantic Council, and I think we are waiting on Denise. I'm keeping it informal because I don't know, this just seems to be bringing that out, and so bear with me. You can look up everybody's exact designations and what they do, but I can tell you this much: they represent on this. In this group, we have a very, very big representation and a cross-section view of how digital information, digital news has evolved and where it is at today. So we are going to, so that's the way I'm going to keep it. And I think we've got to start with the COVID lens and what the COVID-19 impact has meant for each one of your individual digital outfits, and then we will pull out to digital news media and the fact that it is today. So who wants to go first? Shall we do one of each from either side? Carlos, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first, but how do you want me to begin exactly?
You want to tell me how since COVID-19 sort of upended our world, how the Al Jazeera experience has been in terms of digital news consumption?
Sure. Al Jazeera, probably like all publishers and broadcasters and anybody else in media, we've had some unique challenges. I mean, this is a good example. Here we are, it's supposed to be a conference, we'd be meeting in person, and now all of a sudden we're doing this remotely and we're working from home. So you can imagine that these challenges were also clearly across all of publishing. So we had to move very quickly to work offsite, work remotely, 100% of our staff. Within 36 hours of the pandemic being declared, we were 100% of our digital team was working remotely. This presented a number of challenges. They were technical in nature. They were logistical in nature, comms, workflows. So we had to get through a number of challenges before we kind of ironed out the kinks. But at the same time, we were very cognizant of the fact that we couldn't drop the ball editorially. And we kept pumping out content throughout this entire period. And our numbers have been through the roof. From May 20th, we surpassed our 2019 numbers. And in fact, we were already probably going to do that with or without the pandemic. And 2019 was a very strong year for us. We'd already grown 35% year on year from 2018. Because we had a content strategy in place that we were executing on, and we were seeing it pay some dividends. But with pandemic, there was a tremendous amount of interest from around the world for all kinds of stories about how you deal with the pandemic, from the most SEO friendly versions to analysis to opinion. So we were dealing with all kinds of different content creation. And of course, you're doing it across platforms. So you're doing it across the website, you're doing it across audio, you're doing it on video products that live on Facebook, YouTube, etc. So we just inundated all of our digital platforms with pandemic coverage. And then we saw a plateau. Then you got the fatigue.
Yeah.
And which I think every single publisher is dealing with now. So people have kind of gotten to that point where they kind of get it. A lot of questions have been answered. Now they're more concerned about what happens next.
Yeah. So
but for the most part, news has taken over.
So Carlos, when you say fatigue, do you see the kind of numbers that you saw in your engagement go down? Because
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Okay.
Most definitely.
Okay, let me bring Ritu in here, because Ritu, I've heard you say something to this effect where, where you see engagement go down and this kind of relentless coverage of COVID-19 and everything it is brought with it. So whether it's basic information about the spread of the disease, what to do with it, if you've got it, how to deal with it, what not to do, and then the flood of news, whether it's political news, financial news. Have you had a similar experience at the point that Carlos has mentioned, that engagement has gone through the roof, and now here we are at a point when again, it's probably going down?
I think that would be true for us as well. We definitely saw a major spike in the early days of the pandemic, and I think there was a lot of curiosity wanting to get answers to, what is the disease, what is the virus, what is the treatment, etc. But I think two things happened in the second phase as the reporting moved from the health and the epidemiology part of it to the economic failures, the failures in public health, etc. I think there was a bit of, that kind of coverage is where I think universally where the news fatigue or the news avoidance kicked in. So what we discovered is that we actually built 2 or 3 things that we built out over some time, which is actually what's worked for us now. One was, of course, our fact check. We built out a fairly strong fact check vertical, which we call WebProof, which very quickly, and that combined with our health, we had a health side. So we had a whole panel. We've had doctors and panel on our side. So getting to hear of what the myths are and what the facts are from doctors, we found that people didn't want to know about economic failures. There was a certain amount of limited interest in economic failures as stories relative to hearing from senior doctors on the health aspect. I think a lot of FAQs, I think a lot of focus shifted to, we found a lot of traffic on our lockdown related FAQs. So the other thing that worked really well for us is we have a citizen journalist vertical we call My Report. And I think there were a lot of people who were dealing with really poor quarantine facilities in in Bihar, in down south as well. And they wanted to be able to talk about it. There were also people wanting to be able to connect with their family members, and they had a lot of people who had family in Kashmir, for instance. And there was a lot of uncertainty because of whole internet, control internet. So I think those kind of things, I think the regular news, and of course then slowly as the UAPA arrests started happening, and now of course Vikas Dubey. So I think we can see that the news has shifted. The news 100% focus on COVID per se is no longer
right.
And the plateauing is there as well. I mean,
but before I bring Yasir into the picture, one very quick answer I want to hear about the kind of the engagement, the numbers of people, whatever metrics you want to throw at us. But did you see a dramatic increase pre and post COVID where digital news consumption was concerned?
See, we saw a early COVID insane spike, an unreal spike, and that spike has now normalized.
But has it normalized to pre-COVID levels?
In fact, it's slightly higher than pre-COVID levels.
Right. Okay. Okay, Yasser, you want to give us a sense of what's happened at at Euronews.com? It's 12 languages. I think y'all are publishing in 12 languages, isn't it?
Yeah, 9 European languages plus Turkish, Arabic, and Farsi.
Arabic, yeah.
So our trajectory was very similar to that of Al Jazeera. We started off very strong, broke multiple records, and then the fatigue happened, and we were sort of looking ahead and having, just like Carlos and the AJ team and many of you other journalists, having covered huge disasters like this before, we were anticipating a fatigue point. We didn't know when it was coming, but we knew it was. So we started changing tack and tried to figure out what is it that our audience was coming to us for primarily. They weren't coming to us for daily updates at the forensic level that they used to at the start. They weren't coming to us for anything other than two key things that our audience were coming to us for. One was the debunking. Is this correct? 10 sort of myths about COVID that that you should not believe, and here's why. And so we have a fact-checking team here who started cranking out material on that. Plus, Europe is one of the biggest travel destinations in the world. So a lot of folks were coming to us for travel-related information. And travel doesn't just mean landmarks and monuments and this and that, but it means travel insurance. It means flight cancellations. It means aspirations. It means achievements. So we are, in fact, currently building and about to launch very soon a new travel vertical, because a lot of advertising money is also going towards travel, simply because it's one of the few brand safe places left on the internet, and nobody wants to sponsor COVID content, and neither Google nor YouTube want to monetize COVID content. So I think our strategy is to focus on what is next and how this is going to impact your lives, at least from a European perspective. In Europe, the media is rich enough, the local media is rich enough that we don't really need to compete at the local level. There's lots of very powerful media companies operating at hyper local and local levels. In France, we have excellent newspapers. In Germany, we have excellent newspapers. Our big sort of strength is are the Eastern European audiences, where the local media perhaps is not very robust. Also in Turkish and Arabic and Persian, because the audiences there don't trust their local media, and we are seen as an independent and neutral sort of purveyor of information. So that's where we're building our audiences. Our English audience is still our biggest, but we are competing with all sorts of folks. But I think we are at our strength is both at the continental level and also in these 3 languages. But more and more people are coming to us for what is life going to be like next type of content. And what we've seen once we started doing that is that we beat the plateau. Is that and we dropped our COVID coverage from 100% COVID coverage to about 50 to 40% COVID coverage, and started rediscovering the stories that we were strong on before COVID happened, and started reinterpreting them in the COVID light.
So Yasser, but has COVID been a turning point in terms of numbers and the consumption?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Will it be a pre-COVID and post-COVID era where digital news consumption is concerned?
I'll tell you what's been happening in most of the media circles that I know of, is that the traffic is going up, but the engagement is not. In fact, the engagement is taking a nosedive, right? And that's because flyby traffic has been insane. People coming in, reading, about COVID and getting out. We used to have, for example, per visit, people used to read 2-3 pages on our websites. Now they're reading 1.49 pages. So it's literally gone down by half, even though the number of people coming in has been astronomical.
Right.
The scroll depth is astronomical. People are reading. What they're not doing is moving on to too many other things, because their interests have become so limited. Is what
right.
I think. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think so. Let me get Venu in here. Venu, is there a pre and post COVID sort of reckoning that has happened for digital news media? You think from the wire perspective?
Yeah, in the sense, there are two, three very distinctive, uh, what should I say, pre-COVID, post-COVID inflection points that I see. One is Anuradha, which by the way, I've spoken to some friends who who are in traditional media, newspaper owners. Like
Yes.
I spoke to Dainik Bhaskar, one of the family members whom I know well. Like he told me something interesting, which is my experience also. He said that from the Indian perspective, where as you know, advertising was lagging behind. It was while in India, eyeballs were moving to digital quite a lot, but proportionately advertising was lagging. Right. This was until about year 2 years ago. So I am told now, which is admitted by newspaper owners. So it's authentic, which is that the share of advertising on digital in these 3 months has actually grown from 14% to now 21%. Earlier it was dominated by television. About 40% of advertising was television, 41%. Maybe print was about 32, 33. A bit of some radio.
The share of the ad pie, it's very clear that digital is neck and neck with print. In fact, some reports say that digital news media has overtaken print news media share of the ad pie here in India. Okay?
So incrementally also what is happening, Anuradha, is that the digital agencies are offering, I'm told that the digital agencies are incentivized to do much more advertising on digital because they are getting much bigger commissions than in print and TV.
Right.
Now this is from a revenue perspective, good for digital, but there is another problem which I see from a subscription perspective.
We'll come to that. Give me a sense of what is happening at the wire. Wire's experience of the fact that COVID-19 seems to have been an across-board enabler for digital news media and digital news media consumption and the digital way of life or ecosystem, if you want to put it like that. I mean, many of us have actually managed to survive this awfully traumatic 3 months because of the fact that we live in a digital world, isn't it?
So I'll tell you our wire experience.
Yeah.
The trajectory is pretty much similar to what Ritu said. Initially, there was a big spike, a lot of fact checking, a lot of anxiety, fear. So we have a science and health vertical, which was like really flooding the website with a lot of content around COVID, and then there was a little tapering off. But overall, we did experience initially about 30%, 25-30% growth in readership, stroke viewership, videos, etc. And then there was this tapering off. But while we are a small outfit, right? So therefore we are more nimble. So we could operate from our homes. So we didn't. Our office was shut all this while. So and we have about 45 people, small outfit. So for us, adjustment was not difficult. So we adjusted very fast, and for whatever amount of content that we put in, we were maintaining that, and in fact putting up more content also. So and our donations actually increased. So we are a non-profit, so we are donation based. So during this period, happily for us, our donations went up. So our motto, as you know, is we are an open site. We are not behind paywall. So we just our slogan is that you pay for good journalism. So people donated more, and also donated more because from another perspective, during COVID, we found that the Indian state, the government, was also seen as impinging on the rights at various levels, right? The way they used the National Disaster Management Act, the way in between they were going after various, cases in the Delhi riots, the CA, So we are putting out a lot of those contents also, and that is also part of our constituency. You know, we are a self-proclaimedly we are an anti-establishment channel. So we were, along with COVID, we were putting out a lot of political content, which also spoke about how the state was using the situation to maybe in some areas curtail rights, etc. So
right. Okay. Fatima, do you want to come in here and, you know, you're familiar with the Southeast Asian landscape. What is your take on digital news consumption and what is happening at this point of time, where when it comes to the way people are engaging with digital news media?
Yeah, I admittedly am not a journalist, and so forgive me for I'm just really absorbing a lot of the information I'm hearing from all the amazing panelists that I'm with. You know, it's a great question, and I think it's fascinating to hear this conversation. It's really a time to rebrand, and that's what we're seeing, and that's kind of the theme that I've been hearing amongst all of the panelists right now. And it's not that digital news was not thinking of this; it just was rushed into it. And I think this is a time where all of the innovation that's happening in digital news is going to it's going to stand the test of time. It's a test of time, whether or not it's going to last post-COVID, which is one of your questions earlier. It really depends on the innovative tools that digital news is using today. So prior and pre-COVID-19, everybody here knows that, you know, I think digital news and even traditional news outlets were competing with misinformation and disinformation. And today, you're not only competing with that, but you're also competing against, and that, in fact, I think it actually exaggerates media's whole point, right? And press, the entire point of press is to check, is to be a check on the government and to be a check on the facts, right? And you see a lot of people, I mean, this is true in the United States, this is true all over the world, and it's very true in India as well. You see that the digital news is being used as a check, and that's probably why you're getting quick takes, right? You're getting headlines that are being clicked on, read through, and people are, and in fact, you're competing with all each other's outlets, right? You're not just going to one outlet, you're checking all of them to make sure you're getting all sides of the news story. So I think this is a real opportunity during COVID to, digital news has been forced to rebrand itself. And it's a space to innovate. I think that that's what we're hearing as well, is that, you know, is this a time for digital news to now start pumping out podcasts in India, right? I mean, you already pre-COVID had this competing ideas of cheap data, a very young population, widespread mobile usage, and then again there was that distrust. There was a distrust in traditional media. It all equated to a changed media landscape, specifically in the region, and now you're competing with COVID-19 at the same time. And so I think this is a really fascinating time to rebrand for a lot of the digital news outlets, and it's all about how you're going to build that infrastructure, and it's creating that culture right now for how Indians and I think people all over the world are going to start interacting with digital news post COVID-19. But it's really about creating those habits now, and I do think that it comes with a big impact on business models right now for the long kind of benefit of keeping these.
Fatima, I'll come back to you, and we'll have a conversation on business models. But I can see Denise has joined us, so let me get her in here. Also, because you just mentioned that this is an opportunity to rebrand digital offerings, and I think Denise at TI, you know, she comes with a whole bunch of you know, very, very well-known brands that are available in their digital avatars. Denise, hi, you want to just jump into the conversation, give us a sense of TI pre and post COVID, and has that been a turning point in digital news consumption, digital content consumption? What is the experience that you can share?
Yes, thank you for having me. I really am honored to be on this panel. I haven't worked at the Telegraph in 12 months. I work for Future Media now, but I can tell you the direction it was going and what the Telegraph has done now. It's essentially actually been a prosperous time because subscriptions have gone up as people realized because of the paywall that if they wanted quality content and from trusted writers, that became so vital during the time of COVID, you were going to have to pay for that. And so by really pushing and sticking to their guns on their subscription strategy, it's paid off, it's gone up. That's on the digital, but also on the physical, because there became a fear of shopping and going out to, here in the UK, to supermarkets, or if you got into a supermarket, you just quickly got your stuff and got out as fast as possible. Print subscriptions, which had been, going down for a number of years, started re-emerging again as people thought the customer journey is so important, the user journey is so important. They have decided to make that absolutely paramount in everything and not muddy the waters anymore. So they've actually got rid of their commercial editorial division. They will be producing editorial that can be badged, but not that kind of native content advertorial that sometimes, you're not sure as a user if what you're reading is paid for or not paid for, or an editorial initiative. So that is a real landmark. They've been the first people to do that. And that again is showing that everything now is about the subscriber. As they saw ad revenues go down, they want to, just keep the buoyancy of the subscriber revenues coming in. I work in magazines now at Future Publishing, which was TI Media. And the way that has affected the editorial is a lot of the magazines, again, saw subscriptions, old-fashioned, mail order subscriptions start to happen again as people needed diversion. They were stuck in their homes and they thought, this is great, I'll just get the magazines sent to me. I think when people are spending so much time online, there's something very relaxing about going offline and having that tangible experience. The editorial content of the magazines changed. So many of our women's magazines relied on celebrity. This switched to COVID celebrities. So putting NHS nurses on the cover, local heroes, people that were really making a difference.
Frontline workers.
Yeah, because the editorial, you don't want to seem frivolous, you don't want to seem irrelevant. And then everything became about what is the content that's important to the user. Home stuff became really important. As people couldn't travel, all of a sudden DIY, or do it yourself, as they say in England, became really, really important, because if people were looking at, oh, I'm in these four walls all day, I don't like the paint color, what can I do? How can I make changes on a budget? This kind of content started getting lots and lots of traction. And of course, cooking and baking, as people were finding they were have to making their own meals. So in SEO, this kind of stuff or content was really surfacing to the top. So that's it. And then I want to just talk also too about Instagram Live and Facebook Live. These are the winners of COVID, along with Zoom and Netflix, Disney Plus. But the Telegraph, for example, started taking, again, their cooking, their fashion, and doing loads of Instagram Lives. So with the journalists, you got a chance to engage with them, see them, have them talk. And this became a great extension of the brand, and to do it. And we've been doing it ourselves with New Women, for example, giving exercising in your living room on Instagram Live.
I've seen a lot of the entertainment magazines, a lot of them use Instagram Live to do conversations between stars, journalists and stars. So yeah, I think there's something there. Carlos, let me circle back. Let's start, how do you see the challenges to monetization going forward? Because I think we spoke a little bit before we went public with this conversation, and you were talking about how content needs to be able to pay for itself. That's the only way it can survive and sustain, isn't it? So what are the opportunities as well as the challenges at this point of time, given that digital media content, information consumption is where it is at? What are the challenges in monetizing?
Well, I've heard some really interesting things so far from some of the panel members here, and some key takeaways like innovation, rebranding, what Denise was talking about over at the Telegraph and increasing subscriptions there based on lockdown. These are all, you know, challenges and opportunities based on those challenges. It's really interesting to see how we're all dealing with it very differently. Like Al Jazeera, the model there is not, we're not a monetization first model. We're an endowment essentially from the state of Qatar. And of course, on the digital side, we monetize. And so over the last several years, we've had a greater push. However, I am speaking to you now where we have a twin crisis on our hands. We have a health crisis and we have an economic crisis, a global economic crisis, and it's very real and it's hitting every publisher. And it's hit Al Jazeera and we're not alone. And so, yes, I can go ahead and try to monetize, but I'm also just trying to find more intelligent ways to, say, rebrand, more innovative ways to create content. I don't need to get a studio audience if I can do something via Zoom, and all of a sudden people will kind of get it, that they'll accept this kind of content. And all of a sudden I don't have to pay $150,000 for something, I can pay $20,000 for something. So we're having to rethink not just how we monetize, but how we spend. Because we need to be more cost effective across the board.
Yeah,
and
you're preaching to the, you know, you're preaching to the converted in India. Most, you know, I'm going to get Ritu in here.
Yeah,
you know how to do it cheap and good all the time, right? But before I get Ritu, just one question on the challenges to monetization, because yes, it is such an incredibly difficult economic scenario environment. It is difficult to you know, keep your wage bill protected. So the point I'm making is that how do you monetize, and what is the branding that you can do on your digital offering, given that it is born out of Al Jazeera and what the Al Jazeera brand stands for?
Well, to date, it's been programmatic and partnerships and sponsorships. It's fairly straight down the line. Our programmatic has grown exponentially over the last 2 years. It's a much bigger driver than it used to be. We have much more space dedicated for advertisement than we used to. That has upset a lot of people internally. But it is about revenue generation. And we have had to have those difficult conversations because we're such a journalist-first network for a variety of reasons. We were gifted this endowment, and all of a sudden we're making content. But people used to think, well, it's all about the journalism. Well, yes, it is, but you still have to find a way to make money. And on the digital side, we're probably the most aggressive at it because we see this as our way forward for being self-sustainable as a model at Al Jazeera, at my particular network. I am speaking to others in the private sector on this particular panel who do this for a living. But at Al Jazeera, this is a breakaway for us. And so we are kind of leading that way in terms of finding more places for sponsorship, more places for partnership. And clearly the programmatic is something that we're always driving towards. So that's kind of our 3 places where we look to make and save money.
Right. Ritu, come in here. You know, I've been tracking the Quint faithfully last 5 years. Lot of innovations, a lot of cutting edge thought into the you know, and how to make available the same news story that a lot of people may have. Are people buying it? Do you see people wanting to pay for this? Are you today, given the kind of turning point COVID-19 has provided for digital news and information consumption or content consumption, do you feel more confident about going behind a paywall? Because I really feel that people need to be able to buy high quality, good quality news, information and content that they want.
I'm as curious to find out whether people are going to be willing to, whether our cohort of audience is going to be able to is more the question, and the second part being want to pay for quality journalism and innovative journalism. We'll know only once we start going behind a paywall. So far, we only have a membership where we ask people to contribute towards our journalism, the kind of journalism that we are sticking our necks out for. We are in a pretty similar place as what Carlos was walking us through. We are ad revenue dependent. We get some amount of money through some of the editorial work that we do for fact checking, etc. But largely, we are ad revenue dependent. For us, programmatic is loose change. It's really a small trickle that comes in. So it's direct sales, which is where it's at. So far, we haven't seen that much of a hit on our ad revenue, but now we're beginning to, and everyone had predicted that July, August is when the real uncertainty is going to kick in. Because either we found the vaccine or the vaccine was around the corner and consumption would be going up, and there would be this optimism in the sentiment in the market. And there would be but that's clearly not happening. And now we're beginning to see some strange things happening. So it's, in a strange way, it's fun time for digital because a lot of the ad revenue is clearly shifting to digital.
Yes.
The conversations that I've been having with some of the people who are running newspapers, that they're also seeing that that's where it is. The question is going to be on what's your cost base, and what's the total revenue revenue pie that is coming eventually to digital. Because if everyone's going to be looking for digital revenue, then that pie is going to be cut. Slices are going to get smaller and smaller, maybe. There's a difference between the way the advertiser or the brand looks at when they're putting in money in print or television, which is a bit of a spray and pray. That it must have. It's because they've always done it, so they always do it. But when it comes to digital, there's a certain amount of expectation on conversion. Yeah. Because the audience, because it's real time, exactly what impressions, what engagement, what click-throughs, etc.
In fact, I want all of you, I want Yasir to weigh in, because what Ritu has just said is cued it off. Like the digital, what is the advantage of digital media, which is the metrics that allows you real-time information of who is watching what, how much, what they like, etc. That can also be it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? You take those same metrics and you can pull back before you should. You don't go beyond a point because you're so nervous about what the data is telling you. You're not able to stay committed. Give me, Yasir, a sense of how this double-edged sword of the metrics works when it comes to content, and also the ability to then go and monetize it.
As a media company that used to be a TV channel with a website and has now going through a transformation where it becomes a media company with TV channels and websites, and not only competing with just other TV channels, but also with newspapers and newsletters and Facebook publishers and what have you, and the playing field has leveled. There is I'm also finding that there is an inconsistency in how metrics are read and interpreted in the market. Yeah. So while some advertisers will be very, very forensic about what you report to them, and some advertisers are only looking for scroll depth, or some advertisers are looking for page views, some advertisers are just looking for uniques, but it's all dependent on on how well and deeply they understand their own metrics. And it's so funny. I'm as an editor-in-chief as a digital editor-in-chief, my job is at least half education, where I am not only having to educate my sales department on interpretation of metrics, but also sometimes I'll find myself in the unenviable position of having to educate potential clients or their sales staff about what they should be really looking for. I remember being recruited a long time ago by a TV channel who said to me, when they were recruiting me, they'd said, we're in 400 million homes around the world. And I said, well, how many of those homes are watching you right now? It's just that now I know who's exactly on my site. I know how old they are. I know where they're coming in from. I know how they stuck around, how long they stuck around. And this forensic level of metrics, few people, as in like everybody present here, can actually read and understand and know what is actually a monetizable metric and what isn't. Except sometimes you'll find that the people with the money are having trouble interpreting what those numbers are. And a lot of them haven't hired the right people to tell them what those are. There's an insane amount of charlatanry that happens in digital that we just haven't wrapped our heads around. And it has only gone up during COVID. My position from being at Euronews and prior to this being at Al Jazeera has been that news is incredibly difficult to make money from, because who wants to? There are very few advertisers who want to put their money behind misery and war and all sorts of bad news from around the world. And I think where and I really believe this, I think where news organizations are going to make money are the auxiliary content, right? And with their super, and that is why, with us, we do make whatever money we make from news, but I think at Euronews, at least, the future is going to lie in commercial verticals. We have one called Living, where we do a lot of sustainable living type of stuff, eco tech and sustainable sort of development and all that sort of thing. So green things. We just hired somebody from Extinction Rebellion to run it.
Right.
And then we're about to launch a travel vertical. A few months down, we'll be launching a business vertical and a tech vertical. So this is most probably where we're going to make our money, because we're going to be able to offer a metrics package to our advertisers or to the sponsors and say, look, these are the things that we are projecting to deliver you, and these are the things that we think you should be looking at. And whatever else your salespeople are telling you, if it doesn't gel with us, then we need to talk about it. I think that's going to be our approach.
Okay, Venu, we are hearing regulators in some countries beginning to talk about how these tech giants, the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, how can they, your content they shared back and forth, right, via all of their media, their distribution channels. Is there a way to relook at being able to earn from them? What are your thoughts on what's happening there?
Yeah, so Anuradha, I can tell you that in the Indian context, of course, it is happening around the world also. There are a lot of media owners and editor-driven media outfits who are putting their heads together, trying to discuss. Now, this is at a discussion level on whether India can do what Australia recently did. It forced Facebook, Google, and the other aggregators who use our content to share a certain portion of the revenue for traditional content, for the content generators. So I think there is some 10% of their revenues. I think the Australian regulator has put down some formula. This has also happened in Germany. Now, the interesting thing, Anuradha, is this has to be done through a regulation. So when you do it through a regulation, you have to approach the government. Now, when you approach the government, the same old dilemma comes. So whether you can get the state if the media goes to the state seeking such a remedy, whether the state would seek a quid pro quo. So now this is a dilemma, but I feel that we have reached a point where we can argue that editorial content should not be regulated, but business models can possibly be regulated to ensure that there is some level playing. So I describe this as the tyranny of the aggregator. So it's a fact that aggregators need to be subject to some discipline. So
sure, Ritu, I'm sure you have a strong view on this.
I think you've got to be careful what you wish for when you look at regulation, especially in a country like ours, because it can we've already seen how a lot of regulation has been attempted with the intention of actually being able to control editorial media, especially on digital, which is slightly more. I mean, there's still some of us who are independent as against a lot of broadcast and print, which has now ceased to be independent in terms of journalism. I think we have to have consortium of editors or media owners who need to come together, and they have to be as much a voice in the forming of the regulation if it has to eventually work and not lead to crippling business models or not lead to indirect ways of censorship, because that is likely to happen. The other thing is, it's not clear what the relationship, at least in our country, is between the government and say the Facebook and the two large platforms. So it's very difficult to say where it's getting at, but I think there has to be a conversation with a consortium or with bodies of news, digital news particularly, with the platforms. And I think that's the only way, that because leaving it only pleading with the government to bring in the regulation, I'd be very, very wary of.
Or pleading with the platforms to regulate themselves.
Pleading with the platforms. I think the future is for quality journalism, which is not commodity journalism, not news that everybody has.
Yeah.
Gives people a reason to pay for the news that they're coming for. It has to move to subscription. And the other thing is controlling your costs, because your revenue you cannot control in the current environment, and we don't know what the next 6 months are, or even the next 1 year is. So I think controlling your costs and really building your journalism or the quality of your content as something that is distinct, not more of what's on original enterprise content is where. So I think
the point Fatima made about brands. Quickly, Fatima, one comment from you on what we've just discussed, and then Denise, because I'm being told that we got questions that are coming in, and I need to sort of take those on board.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are great, excellent points that are being made, and it was a great segue from Denise's point on how they're leveraging these platforms, Facebook Live, Instagram Live. I think what we're doing now is we're dangling the kind of fruit in front of the subscribers, the future subscribers, right? And again, this goes back to that rebranding. You have to get a hit in the beginning in order to have these loyal viewership, in my opinion. And I think a lot of digital news right now is doing that. I think Carlos mentioned that you're sacrificing a lot of the showmanship and the entertainment for the actual quality of the news that you're pushing out. But I agree with you, Ritu. I think this is like a really good conversation that needs to be had with the social media platforms to figure out a way that so they're not also regulating themselves, because that's clear that. And I mentioned,
okay, let me.
Oh, go ahead.
Let me get Denise in here. Denise, do you think that that this, given that large advertisers have just gotten off Facebook, some of them even other media, the tech giants and social media, do you think this is an opportunity for digital content owners, independent content owners, to try and get into a conversation? It's not a level playing field, but this is a time when perhaps you can be heard as compared to other times, because large advertisers are showing the way.
Social media is still the best way to get your content recognized and seen, and it's a bit like the old NRA adage, guns don't kill people, people kill people. So it's how you use the social media. We're using it in really creative ways. For example, if we want to sell pre-roll, and the advertiser actually wants Twitter, we will create editorial content on Twitter and then put pre-roll against that content, so that we know that we're getting users that are going to engage with this type of content and like it. This works really well in the entertainment space, for example. And still to come in and trialing through social media is the best way. The amount of times, I've overused my Washington Post allotment or my New York Times allotment from just seeing a really great article shared on Facebook or Twitter, and then come through, and then you get the if you like this and you want to see more, you have to register, and then just getting the registration's the first thing that's free, and then getting you reeled in to the point that it's like, now do a trial for 6 months. But that that's all through social media. So it's social media is your friend, it's not your enemy.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can I just pick up a question from? Yeah. Okay. From someone who's tuned in. How can Anubha asks, how can digital platforms circumvent algorithm bias? Which digital stream is authentic and which is not, basis the number of followers, subscribers that they have, and hence how can the whole ecosystem control fake news? Do you want to take that? Does anyone want to take that specifically? How can digital platforms circumvent algorithmic bias? Yasir?
This has been a career-long belief. It's not just recent. And ever since I started working in digital, and I've seen this work, and people think that I'm full of crap for saying it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think good content will transcend any algorithm. I think if your content is consistently good and consistently connecting with what you know your audience to be. And when I worked at Al Jazeera and when I was building the digital video side of it in the early days, we saw this play out in real time, where, you know, when we focused on good content with good knowledge of our audience, it transcended all sorts of algorithm changes at Facebook and at Twitter. And it plays out here at Euronews to this day. And I know it's a philosophical, airy-fairy, stupid thing to say, and it's not mathematical, and it's not technical, and it's not any of those things. But I've seen this work in real time. Make sure your content is good and it's consistently good, and make sure you know your audience and you're all good.
I just want to add just to what Yasir said about real time. Timing is everything. At the Telegraph, and even now, it's our journalists, if they are in a junket, a press conference, a preview screening, they run and they just get that content out. For SEO, your content's going to surface to the top if it's out there first, especially about a topical event everybody wants to know about.
Let me add, good content that is packaged well and released at the appropriate time. How about that?
Appropriate time, but if it's, you know, if it's a hot exclusive, it's first really gets you.
Well, one of the problems that speed and the need to be first has also done its damage to quality journalism.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that all that Facebook is saying and all that Google is saying for search, that they are now going to be focusing on prioritizing original content over speed, and, you know, people just auto-publishing wires content with the desire to be the first and to have the SEO. I'm hoping that that's going to because we've all seen what SEO and first and keyword and trending word, and we've all seen what that's done to journalism, right? So I'm hoping that there is 2020 is sometime going to come to an end. There's so much more bad that can happen at one time, and with 2021, all that's being said and promised with original content actually going to be rewarded.
Actually, my Anuradha, I feel that, you know, this whole notion of fake news. I mean, fake news is not the right term. Let's say the way half-truths or semi-truths they get peddled across social media platforms and other media platforms. Now, this has become a reality today, and fact-checking sites, there's a bit of dialectic here. You know, fact-checking sites are thriving precisely because half-truths get peddled. You know, and even people like Google, etc., these aggregators, they on the one hand, they also provide a platform for half-truths, and at the same time, they are coming out with new business models of how to sort of counter those half-truths, right? So there is a bit of a dialectics involved there. So everybody is enjoying, fake news or whatever news which is not entirely sort of. They're enjoying the speed with which they're coming onto the media, and they're also enjoying building new business models to counter them.
Yeah. So, look, I think my sense is that we've really got to figure out how people will want to pay for good quality, good journalism and journalism of high editorial integrity. Of course, we, all of you, and there are so many, we've seen Al Jazeera make, we know the Quint is doing. There are so many new ways that you're trying to reach out to your audiences. So I really, really hope, as a journalist and as a broadcast journalist who's created programs all her life, that we can get people to value us. I mean, look at the amount we fork out to Netflix and all the streamers, right, for their content, and maybe we've got to figure out why is it that people are willing to pay for entertainment, stroke information, because there's a lot of information content on these platforms as well. We've got to figure that out, and I think we are at the mercy of people at this point of time in terms of being able to survive and offer independent, good quality journalism. I want each one of you to quick 30-second closing comments, because we are at 4 o'clock and I think this was an hour-long session. So go first, Carlos, please.
Well, since we're just talking about news, really quickly, I think some of what was said, making great content, I do believe in what Yasser said. You make the great content, and people will come. I do believe that to my core as well. But I also believe as a news outlet, it's also incumbent upon us to inform, educate, and entertain. We have to find better ways of communicating really difficult stories in a more entertaining way sometimes. That's not to say the news, we change what we do in terms of just straight news content. But when we try to break out of that bubble and try to educate our audience globally in different ways, I think it is incumbent upon us to do a much better job of finding new products that will actually engage an audience in a very different way that's just not the traditional news and current affairs route. And that's what we're working to achieve now.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Ritu?
I think I agree with Carlos. I think news is not Netflix and news is not entertainment, but news is competing with Netflix. And which is why it's very, very important to make your news interesting, to make your content accessible, for it to be exciting enough for people. It's not people's civic duty to engage with news. You have to want them to, they have to want to engage with the way you're putting out news in an interesting, and digital offers so many innovative ways. The other thing I wanted to just say is that I think every person in the newsroom today needs to now be tech savvy. I think every person in the newsroom today needs to know where is the funding for my news coming from? Where's the funding for my journalism coming from? I think those sort of, I'm editorial and I'm business. I think those sort of compartmentalized silos have to now flow into each other, because unless you don't understand that, as I didn't for a long time till I started, running the print, I was only an editor. You realize you're in a bubble and you're sort of congratulating yourself for the fantastic content you're doing, because you're not worried about the audience, because you're not worrying about the other aspects of how news reaches people.
So, so Anuradha, I also believe that news has to be a separate niche. It cannot be conflated with entertainment, because we can't compete with new Netflix, right? So what news can really do, Anuradha, is what Bharat Anand, that Harvard professor who studied digital media a lot, talks about creating user connectedness. So Anuradha, what we need today in the news space is for citizens to be platforms to connect citizens around certain issues which actually define our idea of our society or idea of our community, and citizens and their rights and what they can demand from the states, public policy, etc. I think around these ideas, which are very different from, say, entertainment or Netflix gives you, we can, with good content, with good position, taking a good stand, you can create communities, which is what The Wire is trying to do, actually.
Right. Okay. Yasser, just before I toss to you, I just want to clarify. I'm not saying that news and journalism is entertainment. I'm just saying that long format, narrative, deep dives, a lot of the feature stuff, something that I've worked with very closely all my life, is not finding places in the news environment anymore, you know, in the conventional news environments. And maybe going forward, the streamers may be able to create niches because they are not advertising dependent, and they're just really reeling in the money nowadays, you know, and this is all people's money. There are people voluntarily subscribing for entertainment, and you're finding docus and features lying in that vast library. So just wanted to clarify that, not conflating journalism and entertainment at all. Yasser, over to you.
I'm actually in agreement with most of what all of you guys said, but I'll just add a couple of things. So the thing is, look, we come from about 50, 60, 70 years of working in media that was one way, right? Like we decided what was important and we told people and we expected them to consume it. And there was really, like, other than the Dear Sir letter to the editor, there was really relatively little feedback on that. And now we are, at least people of mine and Carlos's, and I'm not going to comment on anybody else's age here, but I can tell you. But we are coming from that sort of world, and we're just getting used to having instant real-time feedback from our audiences. And the one thing that I teach, you know, when I teach class is I always tell my students to have an audience-centric approach to what do you think, what do you know from what you know of your audience? What do you think your audience is going to find valuable? Not entertaining, not informative, whatever is valuable, right? And I think value carries across the board from Netflix to CNN, to Al Jazeera, to us, right? It's the value. What is it about this thing that is going to convince my audience to put down whatever other thing they're doing and pick this thing up that I just made for them? When we made television and when we made radio and when we wrote in newspapers, we always assumed our intellectual superiority over the audience. And that is no longer the case, and it's so vastly apparent. And a lot of folks from my generation actually still believe that the audience doesn't know as much as they do, and that is categorically wrong. Our audience is oftentimes way more informed than we are, and way smarter, and have way more finely tuned bullshit meters than we do. So, you know, if we are going to approach our content with the idea of creating value for a very smart audience, I think that it would be the direction to go into, is to, you know, and whether that is through long form and documentaries, whether that is through a podcast, whether that is through, 30-second to a minute long social video explainers. The point is, you are going to get to your audience if you can communicate to your audience that you understand that they are smarter than you and that they deserve value.
Okay. Fatima? We'll go to you, and then Denise will have the last word.
Yeah, again, thank you everybody for all the amazing insights. I think that the final comment is just that towards the end, we're talking a lot about social media and these other platforms, but I think at the end of the day, it's important to realize that these are just platforms, and it's a way, kind of, Yasser, to your point, is that the quality journalism is the one that these days at least is circulating as clickbait as well, right? Because it is the fact check. And so once they click it, right, it's to Denise's other point, is that then you start hitting them with subscriptions. You start hitting them with the trial articles. And so you're building that viewership, you're building that loyalty with every news article of yours that gets published in these platforms. So I think, like I mentioned in the first take, is that, there's a lot of innovation that's going to be seen in the digital news, and I'm really excited to go on this journey. And Yasser, as one of those millennial viewers, I'm really excited to see a lot of that quality journalism play out in this new post-COVID and during the COVID age.
Okay, Denise, we'll leave you with the last word.
No pressure, no pressure then. Just that news doesn't act alone. It's got to be a patina of everything. So that's even bringing in expert analysis, infographics, anything that's going to make the experience richer. It's got to sit alongside sport, lifestyle, fashion, entertainment. Those are the easy hooks to pull people in, and then they can go down and see what else is on the platform. And Yasser talked about audience-centric, And that's absolutely vital. At the Telegraph, they made their stance on Brexit based on audience polls. When they knew that their audience were pro-Brexit, the Telegraph then decided, like, okay, we're going to go full throttle on this. And the strategy worked. They doubled their figures. They got huge engagement because they became a pro-Brexit publication. So knowing the audience, absolutely vital. Rewarding the audience. There's been so many redundancies made at publications and the sales teams, but the audience marketing teams have stayed because it's giving rewards for your subscription, for engagement, for watching. And still old-fashioned exclusives, you know, if you can bring those in. The Telegraph broke the MP's expenses. That was a huge story. Telegraph got there first and did it legally, did it with compliancy, and it benefited them. So those are all the key things.
All right. Okay. Everybody, thank you very much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, panel. I've been getting pings. Sorry, Anuradha. I've been getting constant pings from the other session because the minister and other dignitaries have already come. Thank you very much. It was a very fruitful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you so
All
much.
power to the minister.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.